Why aren't women like Brooke ever considered when we talk about the feelings of those affected by these decisions?
Because the woke left doesn't care. The woke left does not care about women.
What's next in the fight? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Gains for Girls podcast. We have an exciting episode today. I have people who message me in my DMs constantly asking me, what's the update, right? What's the latest on the issue of men and women's sports surrounding what's going on at the federal level? How are these states able to defy President Trump and federal law, that federal law being Title IX? What's the latest on the Gaines versus NCAA lawsuit? Well, we're going to get into all of that today. We're talking to, his name is Rob Farquharson. He is a part of the Texas Attorney General office. They have been so pivotal on this issue. I would say the issue of gender ideology at large. This office, really specifically Attorney General Ken Paxton, has just been willing to do the hard work. Lots of people claim they're willing to do it, but they aren't really. Ken Paxton in his office is. Rob works in that office. Very excited to talk with him about what's going on with U.S. Master Swimming, the U.S. Tennis Association, and even the NCAA. One thing about Rob, and I think it's important that you guys know this, he is now running for county court at Law Number 2 in Kaufman County. I'm very proud to support him. I think after listening to this episode today, you guys will understand why. So if you want all the latest updates on the issue of men and women's sports and beyond, listen to this episode here. Well, Rob, thank you for joining the Gains for Girls podcast. Really, there has been no Attorney General office that has done more for the social epidemic of gender ideology on really all fronts, on the medicalization front, on the parental rights front, what's happening in the educational realm, of course, on the issue of men and women's sports, than the state of Texas. And so can you walk us through some of the different investigations and suits that your office has launched on really any of those topics, but I think specifically on the issue of men and women's sports? Because one of the things that I have admired so much in these past few years, feeling like I've really began to understand the inner workings and the nature, especially of the media landscape surrounding, some of the cultural chaos. Lots of people want the headline, right? They want to appear as if they're doing the right thing, the moral thing, the just thing, the fair thing, but they're not actually willing to do something about it beyond giving a quote. Your office continually does what they can to prevent this issue from happening. And it sounds like the bare minimum, but nonetheless, admirable, necessary, urgent, and I'm deeply grateful. So can you walk us through some of these investigations and different suits that your office has launched?
Yeah. Well, first, we are super grateful for you, grateful for the example that you set for girls across the country. And I think that it all really starts at, and you know this, it starts with, we have a brave, fearless warrior in our Attorney General, Ken Paxton. Ken Paxton, like you said, when he pursues these things, he doesn't stop at the headline. Ken Paxton wants to stop men and women's sports, period, end of story. And until that's accomplished, he's not going to stop. So with respect to the lawsuits that we've got, we have had, we initially sued the NCAA. Followed by that, we sued U.S. Masters Swimming. And then recently, I guess we didn't sue them, they sued us, the U.S. Tennis Association. We opened an investigation, and they, I think, saw the writing on the wall, ran down to a Travis County court. And so they stopped our investigation. They sued us. And what the angle of our lawsuit is a deceptive trade practices, right? You have men and you have women. And the analogy we've used a couple times is you have whole milk and skim milk. And just because you relabel whole milk as skim milk, it's still whole milk. It doesn't change, right? And then with respect to, I think you mentioned the gender mutilation of children. Yeah, we have had that. Our state passed a law prohibiting transgender medical treatment of children. And we have had doctors in this state that have continued to do that past the violation. I mean, it's just evil is what it is. And so, yeah, we've got two doctors up here in the DFW area that we are suing, for violating SB 14 and mutilating children. Um, One of those doctors actually recently surrendered her medical license and left the state, so that was a great win. And again, all goes back to Attorney General Ken Paxton.
Well, praise God. I think, especially in regard to the unregulated butchery of children, I long await the day where we see every state's attorney general office go after these monsters. I mean, it's so like Frankenstein esque when you really think about what is happening, what they're doing, how they're cutting off healthy body parts of children or adults for that matter. And sometimes, I mean, it merely requires like a 30-minute consultation prior to that. So appreciate you guys and the work that you're doing there. A few things more sinister than that practice. We talked about some of the different investigations and suits surrounding the issue of men and women's sports. Before we get into that and some of the status on some of these cases, I wanted to ask you about the recent strongman competition that went viral on social media. I think largely because, I mean, this was like very much a South Park episode. They had predicted the future, which they have proven themselves like that in The Simpsons, like they have the ability to do somehow. Anyways, you're picturing in your head the big, strong, burly man standing atop the podium, holding the trophy. The girl in second looks visibly upset by this, right? This happened. It went viral. It was exposed what Strongman had been doing, but they pretty quickly released a statement saying that they were unaware of this. They revised their policy. They attempted to make things right by awarding the second place finisher, the rightful champion, with the trophy, stripping him of his title. Anyways, they did this almost immediately. Would this have been something that the Texas Attorney General office could have or maybe would have looked into had Strongman not quickly acted here?
Absolutely. I mean, that's our directive. Attorney General Paxton is not okay with men and women's sports, and where it is happening in the state of Texas, we will be there. I think that they took the right action immediately afterwards. To your point, I think that they saw that they were in a state that does not tolerate that, and so they very quickly tried to remedy the situation.
One of the cases I wanted to specifically ask you about is master swimming. The visual in your head is again reality here. Big man, strong muscles, like he's huge, bicep veins, his quads are massive. He has won many national titles in the women's category. Recently, it was World Aquatics, I believe, that barred him from participating in women's sports until he was willing to take a pretty generic sex screening verification test, which basically all this is a very simple cheek swab. But Hugo, that is his male name. I believe he now goes by Anna or Hannah, maybe. He came out and said, chromosomal tests are invasive and expensive procedures. My insurance refuses to cover such a test because it's not medically necessary. No U.S. state requires genetic tests for recreational sports events like these. Not even U.S. Master Swimming, the national governing body for recreational adult swimming in the U.S., demands this for any of its events. I will just say to this really quickly because this is something that I know I'll speak personally, I've been pushing for is sex screening. Again, it's a very easy way to determine chromosomally what you are, either male or female. This is the policy that I believe and something that we're hoping for out of our lawsuit, Gaines versus NCAA, will achieve. But the idea that this is invasive, a simple cheek swab. Let's go back to COVID when
It's
we were having
laughable.
our brains tickled by a Q-tip. It's laughable. That's far more invasive. Anyways, enough of that. The state of Texas has launched an investigation. What is the status specifically of this one surrounding U.S. Master Swimming? And what are the grounds, the objective of this suit?
Yeah. Well, I want to go back real quick on the SRY screening, and this is just sort of the knowledge that I've developed over time. Is a lot of people think, hey, let's go on birth certificates. Well, guess what? Birth certificates don't work. In 44 states, you can change the sex on your birth certificate. In at least 14 of those states, like Tampon Tim up in Minnesota, you can confidentially change the sex on your birth certificate. So, then you have a person who was born a man changes the sex on their birth certificate to be female. And in some of these states, the birth certificate the original one is confidential, and the second one cannot be marked as amended. There is no way for any sports association like U.S. Master Swimming or any of these others to then know that the person has changed their birth sex. And with respect to whether or not it's invasive, as you know, the NCAA, a lot of these sports associations, they do drug testing. You mentioned that there's a cheek swab. There is a cheek swab. That is, I think, the easiest, the most common. But they can do it with a urine test. The same urine that is tested for drugs can be tested for the SRY gene. And so the idea that this is invasive, we already do drug testing. It is laughable. Yes, U.S. Master Swimming, what U.S. Master Swimming, for those who don't know, is a recreational adult swim league, and you probably know that better. So if I'm wrong, you can correct me.
No, you're exactly right. I didn't even think to describe it, but that is needed for context. Absolutely.
Yeah. So U.S. Master Swimming basically was allowing, as you mentioned, men to compete against women, and I think that they ended up changing their policy, and they said that men can continue to swim with women, but they can't win awards. Um, the problem is, and again, what our lawsuit is focused on is consumer deception. The consumer in U.S. Master Swimming they're the swimmers, right? And so all the women that are getting in pool, they think they're getting in a pool with women, and they're not. And so that's the focus of the lawsuit is to go after their past conduct and the deception that they caused. Like I said, I mean, and again, this all goes back to Attorney General Paxton. He is committed to stopping this and to stopping this consumer deception.
So what if US Masters came back at this point and said, "Okay, well, we will let our athletes know that a male is going to be in the pool." At that point, are they in compliance with state and federal law, um, or what would that process look like?
Well, I mean, speaking to the deceptive trade practices, I guess you go woke, go broke, right?
That's That's it. Yeah, obviously perfect examples of this. Bud Light, I mean, they essentially lost $27 billion overnight. But you better believe their next commercial was a big burly man on a motorcycle with a camo can. So, and I think that's what drives a lot of this too, is money. And I would imagine for even sport governing bodies, national governing bodies like U.S. Masters Swimming, they don't wanna be sued, and so the fear of losing money, I would imagine, drives this, which is why I believe that litigation on our side, is necessary because they can't keep using the excuse of, "We don't wanna be sued." Well, it's like, "Hey, we're gonna sue you," right? So I think that's fantastic. We'll be following this as well, this case, because I believe it's really pivotal. Has your office been in touch with any of the women involved, who have maybe had to compete against Hugo?
Yeah, I can't get too far into that and what we're doing. But I mean, this is what's important. We need states attorneys general across the country who are bold and ready to take action, like our attorney general is, and that's how we stop this.
So regarding the NCAA, one of the misconceptions about the public was that following President Trump's executive order about banning men from women's sports within any educational program that receives federal funds, I think the public believed the notion that the NCAA would follow suit, and understandably so. The NCAA released a statement agreeing to comply in the following days after this EO. But right, shocker, like that was all talk from the NCAA. As I've alluded to on this episode, we have an ongoing case with the NCAA. I think it's called Gaines versus NCAA. But you mentioned the state of Texas has sued as well. And so, can you talk about this suit and even where things currently stand with the NCAA and them allowing men to play in women's sports?
Yeah. So the NCAA, like U.S. Masters Swimming, when you plug into a TV and or you go to an event and you are watching, let's say, for example, women's volleyball. That was one of the most recent examples. Uh, you expect that you're watching women, right? And when you send your daughter off to college to go play women's volleyball in the NCAA, you expect that she's living with and that she's playing against women. And the NCAA that's not what their policy was. Their policy was that men could compete. So the NCAA has changed their policy. Their focus is now on they say that if you listen to them, they'll just parrot the same statement. There is no path for men to compete in women's sports. If you press on that at all, as I explained earlier about the birth certificates, that's just simply not true. Um, it is on paper true, but it something that I think is important to highlight under the last NCAA policy, schools had to report when they had a transgender athlete participating. Right. So now under the new policy, the NCAA has wholly removed themselves from the process. So they're burying their heads in the sand, and they don't want to know. And so with respect to where does the lawsuit stand, you know, just recently the state took a deposition of the NCAA, and to give you an idea of where are these lawsuits moving, are we going to be able to work with the NCAA? We asked a very simple question. Would you agree that there are two biological sexes? And the person that the NCAA designated to be their representative said, I would not agree that there are only two biological sexes, right? We're we're just not even on the same playing field, right?
No.
And so that's where we stand. Not promising, but our Attorney General Ken Paxton, he's ready to fight this thing to the end until the NCAA gets into compliance.
I'm so curious when you have people in these prestigious, powerful positions such as this, representing, a high level case, who say things like this. Like, if you were to continue to press them and say, like, okay, then how many are there? Like, can they give a finite answer? Or I imagine it would be, well, something to the effect of, like, it's infinite, or we can't tell, or it's still up for debate. And then if you further ask them, well, then what are they? It just is so nonsensical. And you're right. At that point, it's hard to debate on the issue if you're not even on the same remotely,
Yeah,
regarding the same foundation. So
yeah,
that's insane. And any normal person would see it that way as well. In talking about the NCAA and talking about volleyball and in talking about birth certificates being made fraudulent, there was a pretty high profile story coming out of California, but surrounding a Texas native by the name of Brooke Slusser at San Jose State University. This is one of those cases where a male athlete my understanding is changed his birth certificate and all identifying documentation, government issued documentation, to appear as if he was born a woman. Of course, not the case. But there was a really compelling article that came out, I think just a few weeks ago. The headline says, former SJSU volleyball star reveals severe health issue that stemmed from Title IX conflict with school. And I read this article, and I think this is what most people don't see when it comes to men and women's sports, right? Like, the emotional distress that leads to physical harm that women face. And so, again, for clarity, a male athlete was put on the San Jose State women's volleyball team. The school lied to the women. They never disclosed that he was a male. Brooke spoke up about this after realizing that she had been living with the man. She had shared hotel rooms and accommodations on team trips, on travel trips. And in speaking about this, the media, news outlets, her coach even, they totally vilified her. She became the enemy. The male athlete even, like, allegedly conspired to physically harm her for speaking out. Uh, to speak to some of the physical effects that she saw, right? The stress and the anxiety caused her to lose over 30 pounds. At 5'11", she was 128 pounds, this article said. She lost her menstrual cycle for 9 months. She slept, I think, 2 to 4 hours a night. She eventually had to drop out of school and move back home to Texas for her safety and for her health. And this is, I view it as abuse. And so my question for you is, and again, I understand your position in this as a legal mind, but I mean this question could be asked to anyone. It's like, why aren't women like Brooke ever considered when we talk about the feelings of those affected by these decisions?
Because the woke left doesn't care. The woke left does not care about women. We, you know, thank God for women like you and for women like Brooke who are willing to, I mean, it's not easy to stand up in the face of opposition and to be the sole person who says, hey, this isn't right. But that's what Brooke did, right? Brooke went to college and expected that she was living with women. She expected that she was playing volleyball next to women. And as she, is undressing in her locker room, undressing in her home, she thinks that she is surrounded by women. And the gaslighting and the emotional toll to all of a sudden be told, actually, for the last year, I've been living with a man
Mm,
as a dad, and I'm sure Brooks' dad was, I would be irate. You expect that the NCAA, you expect that these schools are looking out for your best interests, but they're just not, right? They don't have, they are not, if they have a transgender athlete participating, they're not telling the participants. They're not telling anybody. That's a problem. They owe that to the female athletes that go to play at their schools and that generate money for them.
that's it. It's total betrayal by an institution whose job it is really to protect you. What are some of the latest wins that we've seen surrounding this issue, not just in the state of Texas, but I mean even internationally? We've seen some big news out of the IOC even. So can you speak to maybe a few of the wins that we've seen?
Yeah. So we've got the IOC, World Athletics, and World Boxing. Um, those organizations, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that all of them have committed to at some level implementing SRY gene screening. And so that's going to be the new golden standard. The SRY gene screening, like you mentioned, it's a very similar or it's a very simple test, and it's an inexpensive test. That's where we're headed. And so I think I don't know exactly where the IOC stands, but I know that they had put out that announcement recently.
My understanding with the IOC is that their policy won't be released until January. They've been cryptic in saying, we've turned this around, but we don't know what the policy is yet. So my understanding is that we should know soon if the policy is satisfactory. And I'm of the same mind where if you don't have the SRY gene screening or test, then I don't believe this is a satisfactory policy, especially when competing at the highest and most elite level, that being the Olympics. But world boxing, they've done a phenomenal job. I think really they were like the first to do a policy as you know well as they've done. World Aquatics has followed suit, so hopefully we see more. On the other hand, you have other sport governing bodies such as the NWSL, the National Women's Soccer League, that are have atrocious policies in place and do not protect women at all. And so I guess my question for you is what's next in the fight? I know earlier this month we saw that in the state of Texas, the Texas Women's Privacy Act went into place, which means no more men in women's prisons or really any private space like locker rooms, bathrooms, domestic violence shelters, as I said, prisons. Is this kind of the next necessary step that states can and should be taking?
Yes, well, for the ones that are behind the ball, we've got to get men out of women's sports in the first place.
Right.
Um, Not that this needs to be broken up into steps. I mean, it seems so obvious that men should not be in women's private spaces. Women deserve their own private spaces. I mean, the fact that we have to have this discussion about can a man become a woman and can a man go into the bathroom non-consensually with a woman, it is insane. I do think that sort of where we stand right now is some states have taken action on sports, and then the next step, the thing that's coming up behind it, is the locker rooms and the bathrooms. And ultimately, what we need is we need people that are we need to elect leaders in our country who are committed to this and who, like I don't want to, you know, beat a dead horse, but we need people that are fearless fighters like our Attorney General, Ken Paxton. We need him in a policy making position like the United States Senate, where he can push this. And we need people like that who are not going to stop when they get a good headline.
Well, and speaking of, you are now running for county court at law number 2, I believe, in Kaufman County. And so, can you tell us about this and what we can do to support you?
Yeah, so I'm running for county court at law here in Kaufman County. And what the county court of law is, it's a general jurisdiction court in here in Kaufman County. And so it'll hear civil, criminal, family cases, and it can hear the full gamut. It's kind of interesting running for judge because you can't really take policy positions. Now, what you can do is point back and you can say, "Look at what I have done," and so that's what I have been doing. I at the Attorney General's office, I've worked on cases to secure our border. I wrote an amicus brief before I got to the Attorney General's office in support of a law to keep pornography out of the hands of children. And I've been working on these cases to stop the gender mutilation of kids. And on top of that, we've got the women's sports issue. So I'm grateful to have people like you who have again boldly stood up and endorsed me. And anybody who wants to help, they can donate. They can visit my website. It is Rob FOR4 Kaufman.com.
That's it. Well, we so appreciate you. We need people who are willing to enforce the law, right? Like it's pretty standard, pretty simple. Both state law and of course with President Trump back in the Oval Office, federal law.
I think we live in a time where judicial activism is at an all-time high. We've seen that with the U.S. Supreme Court, and you see that at local levels too. You see judges that are letting people off on the streets, or that are trying to play defense lawyer or prosecutor. The job of a judge is to call balls and strikes, and that's what we need more of.
100%. We have seen so many rogue activist judges, even here in my home state of Tennessee in Nashville. There was a man who just last week, I think he'd been arrested 17 times, released 17 times, and he just raped a woman to death on the steps of a church in downtown Nashville. That woman's death was a choice. It was preventable, but because of activist judges, ultimately it cost her her life. And there are many stories, obviously, just like that. We've seen several out of North Carolina. The list goes on. I know I don't have to tell you, and I know I don't have to tell the people who are watching and listening to this. So we so appreciate your willingness to step up to lead as you have done in the AG's office, as I imagine you will certainly continue to do. For you said you're a dad for your kids, now for our daughter. Just eternally grateful. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Riley.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Gains for Girls podcast. We talked about a lot of victories and they're worth celebrating, but still lots of work to be done. Specifically, we're going to be watching what happens in January in the new year when the IOC releases their policy. We are going to specifically be looking if they are going to be testing for the SRY gene. Really important stuff. If they don't, not a satisfactory policy, and we should demand change. Appreciate you guys. Again, I want you guys to do what you can to support Rob. Again, running for county court at law number 2 in Kaufman County. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you again next week.